pre-pandemic, we were really starting to crush it in terms of our overall ridership.
We had added some new service in January of 20, and then February, same thing, was the largest February that we had on record.
It was, the normal routine of work.
And then all of a sudden, the door slammed.
March came.
Never in 1,000 years would you even fathom that this is as big as it got.
I mean, our ridership just fell off the face of the earth because nobody knew what was going on.
I mean, ridership literally within a day or two just dropped off a cliff. I mean, I want to say it was initially a 95% drop in ridership.
We went from 5,000 people a day to less than 100 a day.
We also in the call center saw a drastic downtick in number of calls we were receiving.
I mean, everything's shut down. Mall of America, the airport, downtown. So we're running trains and there's nobody service. We're servicing no one.
You don't consider the notion that, 95% of what you do and provide is just no longer going to be needed.
You begin to wonder, what am I going to do?
We can't have all these buses out on the road with nobody riding them.
We almost immediately cut, I would say, close to 85% reduction in rides.
We went from 162 routes a day down to 16.
And I mean, social distancing wasn't even like a term at that point in time. It was just really going with our gut with safety.
We had a little bit of a trial back in the mid-2000s with the H1N1. So in terms of protocols for cleaning vehicles and stations and what to do, we had a pretty good game plan in place.
We put barriers in buses. We went with high purification air filters that are antimicrobial. We put in ion air filtration systems in the buses. We put in driver barriers. In the beginning, we added shower curtains for the drivers, just something that was a barrier between the driver and the passenger.
None of us really knew what it was going to be, how bad it was going to be.
There was no supplies to buy. There was nothing that would fit buses. So I mean, everything had to be built around what we needed.
We worked with a local company that deals in plastics and said, all right, here's what we want to do. We want to separate these rows. You got to make it, because if we're traveling down a roadway, it has to be safe. It's something that can't come flying up and hitting a passenger while they're sitting in their chair.
We can fit 57 people on a coach vehicle. We don't want to fill that thing anywhere close to half full. So we said, if we got a trip that's doing more than 20 riders, we're not gonna do any more than that.
At one point we had to turn, passengers away because we were at capacity. There's 7 people on the bus and we can't have 8.
We were able to make sure that every bus that hit the road had been sprayed, wiped, and deep cleaned every day. We weren't sending anything out that hadn't been.
At the end of the day, when that bus was done, we had it was called a fogger. It was a cleaning solution that would kind of fog the inside of the bus.
Metro Transit ended up reinstalling new air filters on all of our buses and light rails so that people could feel safe on them, as well as requiring masks.
The state mandate came in eventually, and then the federal mandate that we're still following today.
I believed in the mask right away. I was wearing the mask right away.
There was some pushback. I wouldn't say it was a great amount of pushback.
We always remind them it's not only for your safety, but for ours as well.
It's for the sake of you too, because if you're sick, who's gonna drive the bus?
We want to make sure we're helping and taking and providing transportation for as many people as we can.
I think everybody was in that same mode at the time, is what can we do to help?
If any healthcare workers came through, we provided them with free rides.
Almost immediately, the need of food insecurity was identified, and within a week, literally, we transitioned into meal delivery. We almost had assembly lines, if you will, from the kitchen all the way to the homes.
We'd get them a list of probably 50 addresses, and they would load it into these boxes and put them on, and we'd get them on the bus, and the runners would get on, and you would just start going to the first address, mark it off, go to the next address.
I was delivering those boxes, and they been like, well, thank you so much for doing this. There was a really good feeling about that.
From March till the end of June, we delivered about 55,000 meals on our buses, and then another 7,500 or so through volunteer routes. Honestly, it was Probably one of the most amazing things I had been a part of.
When it comes to stuff like this, it's not about getting credit. It's really about what you can do to help. And you always got to look at the bottom line. Why are we doing this? And the whole purpose really was to help as many people as we can.
I always knew that there was people out there that needed us. So I think that's where the motivation came from, is that people still had to get to work, people still had to help people. Yeah, so we played a big part in that.
The restaurant worker or the, warehouse worker, things like that, they still have to get to work.
They were just like us. They had to be at the forefront, in the front lines, just like us.
It's just one of those things where you knew you had a job to do, and you just jumped in and did it.
What really impacted my job was kind of when the George Floyd thing happened.
There was a Thursday night in particular. I remember that there was a lot of demonstrations going on in downtown Minneapolis. Everyone was pulling their buses off the road.
That was the first time in months that we started receiving phone calls back to back to back again, because people were wondering what was going on. Some people were like, well, how the hell am I supposed to get home?
My feeling, it's much like a blizzard. If I get you down there, I'm gonna get you home. And so we actually stayed running a couple hours past everybody else. The next day though, collectively, we all pulled our services off the street.
We just had to inform customers that because of everything that's going on in the Twin Cities right now, we're pausing service.
We stopped running trains. That never happens.
In my 25 years with Southwest, that's the only time we've ever pulled service off the street.
And George Floyd was the one thing that made it stop.
It was like 5 days or something without public transportation service.
The area that was burned down to the ground, I grew up my whole life. I said that's where I grew up. And to see it burn down was really hard. But for people to realize how much the police are a little rough on Black people, it felt like that needed to happen. But it was really hard for me to see everything that I grew up around burn down to the ground.
That night, that Thursday night and into the Friday night, that is where a lot of the damages were taking place. The public safety outweighed, keeping the operations running.
It was raining ash. I mean, it felt like a war zone.
That was over a year ago now. It's like you think back to it and it definitely feels like a blur sometimes.
That was such a blur, that 3-4 months there, that first 3-4 months of the pandemic, it was just nonstop, for so many of us.
We never stopped. I never really felt like I had a break.
I mean, we're still in the midst of a pandemic still. I mean, our bread and butter has always been express commuter services to downtown Minneapolis and also students going to the University of Minnesota. That service is still down about 90%.
A lot of people aren't comfortable taking the buses yet.
We're not being fooled to think that it's all going to come back the way it left us. It's going to take some time.
The large employers in downtown like Target, Wells Fargo, US Bank, they still haven't brought many of their employees back to the office. And those are big drivers of our express service.
The days of just bringing people from a park and ride to a single downtown are just gonna shift.
That is a fear that I have, that we will not be transporting into downtown. Everything will be moving out to the suburbs.
Transit as an industry is just gonna have to adapt.
Public transit is so important to our communities in so many ways.
And you just have to sit back and look at the impacts we have. And it might not be the impacts that legislators know or they talk about in the media.
Day-to-day living, people getting to appointments, people getting to the store, people getting a level of independence that they wouldn't have without us.
What we do is vital to a lot of people.
Investment in public transportation is still very important.
It's going to be there. It's not going anywhere.
We're looking forward to better days. We're starting to see some better days.
I think in the future, it's just that I know we're resilient people and I know we're going to be okay and we're going to make it. We're all in this together.